Let's open up the Black Series 6-inch figure of Asajj Ventress from the Clone Wars. Villa Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. I absolutely love the character of Asajj Ventress ever since she was first introduced in that very old 2003 micro series Clone Wars show, and she has made the leap into the full canon nowadays with appearances in the Clone Wars, the Bad Batch, books and comics. Maybe one day we'll even see her in live action. I think she's a fascinating character. Not Sith, dark side, red lightsabers. I really love seeing her journey throughout all of the different media, and I kept this one to be a boxed example of the figure. She was a little bit harder to find. I was going to add it to my Asajj Ventress collection, but now Hasbro is reissuing this figure. This one has a little bit of box damage, so I'm very keen to upgrade. So now I can finally take this one out of the box. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at the figure and all of the details out of the packaging, but first let's take one last look at the box. The packaging style for this Black Series figure is the older style now. Hasbro has since updated it, but I'm still very nostalgic for this side angle packaging design. We have the Black Series logo across the top, a nice large window here showing the figure with her two lightsabers, one on each side, and underneath we have the accent stripe for the Clone Wars series, which is a vibrant yellow color. We can see it says Star Wars The Clone Wars underneath the window. We also have that yellow color used for the character name here, Asajj Ventress. Really like the packaging for this one. You can see why I wanted to keep this one boxed. Moving on to the side, I love the artwork here. It's a really fun, realistic interpretation of Asajj as we see her in the Clone Wars, and the pose is just fantastic with her holding both of her lightsabers up with her skirt swishing here off to the side. The accent color on this one actually comes up fairly high. Some figures it starts in a little bit lower, but I really like the effect it kind of gives glowing behind the figure and the artwork there. Coming down, it gets to a little bit more of an orange color compared to the accent stripe here, and the black text reads Asajj Ventress, of course, there at the bottom. That yellow accent stripe also across the back. This one is number 07 from the Black Series line of figures from the Clone Wars, and again we have that character art cropped and sort of zoomed in a little bit here on the back. Because that accent color comes up so high behind the figure on this side panel, we also have quite a lot of color here on the back. Some Black Series figures it is fully black and white, but I kind of like the glowing yellow tones here. It really sort of highlights the character art here on the back. We also have a blurb here for Asajj Ventress. An assassin trained in the ways of the dark side by Count Dooku, Asajj Ventress yearned to be considered a true Sith, but such status wasn't allowed under the Sith's rule of two. And that blurb is repeated there in a few different languages. The rest of the box is just barcode, warning, all of that kind of stuff. That side window here giving a little bit of light. We also have a little bit of an insert window there at the top. I'm really curious to see how the Clone Wars packaging is going to look in the new series. I really like the accent color of the yellow. I believe the reissue of Asajj Ventress is going to have the same packaging as this, so she will fit in very nicely alongside all of your other ones, because of course she's about halfway through the line of a Black Series Clone Wars figures. So if you missed out, it'll be fantastic to grab her again. This one just has a little bit of wear and tear, so I'm looking forward to upgrading my packaging. So let's open this one up. So now I have the Asajj Ventress figure and her two lightsabers out of the packaging. Let's go over all of the details. And first, of course, we can see that she has a gorgeous purple velvety fabric soft goods skirt here. So the edges of the skirt are not hemmed. That is a raw edge, and if you've ever cut anything with a little bit of a pile where there are long fibers, they can shed a little bit. So I'm going to be very careful about the handling on this bottom one. I don't want to sort of ruin that nice cut edge there. I will gently lift it so we can check her articulation and leg sculpting details later on, but first let's go over the painted details. So of course Asajj is very unique in the Clone Wars in that she doesn't have hair, and she has this really cool tattoo design, which is different to her original appearance in the micro series that was more sort of black triangles. We have this sort of purple design, and we can see that there is a lot of fine printing here across the back especially, and we've got it even around her eyes and around her chin there. I've just got a tiny little purple dot down here by her ear that isn't supposed to be there, but on the whole the printing here is really nice. some really fine detail there. And I quite like the purple that they have used for her top here. It's quite a thick, sort of slick paint job, and when looking at it really close up in person, there is a subtle sort of a speckle to it. There's like almost a glitter in this paint, which is really fun. It's a little bit hidden by the reflection because it is so glossy, but I do have a small paint flaw on here on the right side of her chest. Just a little bit of the paint from this abdomen section has just kind of scratched here. It's very, very faint. It almost doesn't show up, but yes, just something that I'm noting there. And I think perhaps this line here could be a tiny bit tidier, but they've kind of filled in her cleavage there. So it kind of looks like a bit of a spillover, but it kind of goes in there, so not too bad. On the back, she has an exposed back on her shirt there as well, so we can see that line there with the actual back exposed. Not very often we actually see sort of a skin on the back of a Black Series figure in the Star Wars line. We also have that same color here. A little bit darker than the plastic for the face there, but a pretty good match. Of course, she has very pale skin. Then we've got that two-tone painted striping for sort of the wraps on her forearms coming down to the back of her hands. Reasonably tiny. I've got one little patch here and just two tiny little sort of paint flaws on the back there as well. Then we have this pale purple sort of bandaged section around her abdomen coming down to the belt. The belt here actually has a little bit of a pinkish hue, especially on the back. I didn't know if this was supposed to be sort of like a beige or like more of a light gray, sort of more towards white, but definitely has a pinkish tone to it there. And then of course we have this really distinctive sort of tabard section hanging down the front. So this is raised and textured, which is really fun. The gold sections are raised and we have this sort of line texture to it, which is really cool. The printing on this one, it looks pretty even and aligned to it. And then we have sort of a little bit of sort of a weathering with a yellow sort of mustard colored paint coming in at the bottom and working its way sort of about a third or halfway up on the sides there, especially you can really see that. We've just got that tiny little center detail there on the belt. We can also see that we have two peg holes here because Asajj wears her hilts, her lightsaber hilts across the front of her belt, not hung at the sides like Jedi or Sith generally speaking. So we're going to have fun trying to see how those lightsaber hilts are going to fit on these peg sections there. It does work fairly well with the design. One of them looks bigger than the other, so we'll definitely check that out. Thankfully, it kind of gives it a bit of a button design with sort of the two holes, so it's not really throwing me off. Generally speaking, I don't like the sort of peg hole attachments on figures. It always just looks a little bit awkward to me, but I understand that we do want posability. Of course, we can take the blades off these lightsabers. I always wish, and I've said this before, I really wish Hasbro would give us two versions of the lightsabers. Ones that are lit with the blades that don't have the attachment pegs, and then hilts that are not intended to have blades that have the attachment pegs, because if I take a quick look at them, we've got these really large pegs right there in the center of the hilt, which to me I don't like. But anyway, moving back to the figure, I really like the fabric skirt on this, and it was kind of tucked around the legs when she was in the packaging, but now that I take her out, we can see that we don't actually have any side seams. This is sewn in two pieces, but I really like the fact that it doesn't have any side seams. So it has this really lovely drape, especially from the front, and moving on to the back, that we can see that instead of side seams, we have this triangular shaped insert piece in the back. So it all kind of comes up to a point here just below the belt, and it just gives it a really nice flared shape, a little bit wider than it looked like in the box. So if I can sort of pull it out, we can see that it flows really nicely. I like soft goods. I like the sort of short pile velvet that we have used here. It gives it a lovely sheen, a little bit different. We don't often see this kind of fabric used in the Black Series line. Often it's just that sort of a thinner polyester that we see for Jedi cloaks, Darth Vader's cape, all of that kind of stuff. So this is really fun and interesting. It will shed though, so I'm going to be careful about the bottom edge. Every now and again you can just see a little bit of a fiber escaping off the bottom hem there, so I'm just going to be careful. On the inside, that robe is sewn very nicely. We can see the seams there, but they are not overlocked or serged. So again, these inner edges will fray. The one thing about soft goods is they do attract fluff. I do have cats, so every now and again I've just got a little bit of cat fluff that I'm getting out of the way. Now I'm just going to very carefully raise her skirt there so we can see that she doesn't really have much in the way of paint for her legs. These look like these are cast in a sort of a bluish grey or a greyish blue plastic there with that sort of bandage style wrapping. Very reminiscent of the designs of the Night Sisters, just in a different sort of colour tone palette there. A lot of Night Sisters that we see in the Clone Wars have bandaged sort of wrappings on their limbs like this, but more in red tones. So we can see that we've got a colour tone to sort of match the wrapping sections on the rest of the costume here. This is just an unpainted plastic, whereas this is a painted, fairly good colour tone match. This part here kind of matches the darker tone of her forearm wrappings there, so I like that. We will go through the articulation very shortly, but yeah, overall pretty good paint, just a couple of tiny flaws, but again, that's not too uncommon for Hasbro, and I know that they generally have tried to improve their painting techniques over the years. This one did come out just a little while ago, so I'm hoping that a reissued one might just have slightly tidier paint application there. Of course, this one here is one of the big deals. I want to make sure that that gold is really lined up to all of the sculpting there, and of course her face. Really nice eyes. You can see all of the little paint details there. Really, really nice. And of course we've got the red sort of lipstick, bright red lips there. Fantastic. A really sort of intense expression on her face too. She is a sort of a stern character, so I like the expression there. I really want to see if we ever get a version of her from the Bad Batch. That would be fantastic. Or just, you know, some different outfits, because she does have different outfits. I know I'm probably never going to see Black Series figures from the Micro Series. I absolutely love her original sort of black and white and grey iconic original look. I would love to see a Black Series version of that. But I know that we generally don't get a lot of merchandise from the original Micro Series, even though I love it so. I just love the skirt on this one. It's just so unique. We can see that those edges are sewn pretty straight. They look nice. Sometimes every now and again you get a section that's a little bit longer than the others. These look really nice. Because her legs are so hidden, it is a little bit harder to actually pose her, because I can't sort of see where her sort of articulation is. Standing out of the box, she's a little bit askew. I'm definitely going to spend some time really working all of her joints, getting her standing up straight, because I can't sort of see what's going on with her legs. Out of the box she wants to stand a little bit to the side, but we can just see the sort of the length of the skirt, not to the ground, so it's not going to bunch up when she's resting on her feet, but it still pretty much covers most of her legs. We can just see the tips of her boots underneath there, so really nice design there. She's so unique in the way that she looks. Of course we had to have her, you know, we'll always get, you know, lots of different paint variations of Mandalorians and clone troopers, but when there's a character as unique as Asajj, she definitely needs her own figure. Really cool. I'm so happy to finally have her out of the packaging. So let's go through her articulation. She's generally, without taking into account the skirt, she doesn't have too much bulk. A lot of the Night Sisters tend to be a sort of fabric wrapped around the limbs, which of course we don't have armor plates or anything that's really going to get in the way of the articulating movement there. So we can see that her sort of tunic top here comes all the way up. We don't have any skin exposed on the neck. It does give her a very sort of tall necked appearance, because generally we have hair or something covering here in the back, especially when we look at the back. It just looks like a very tall neck. Less so when we look at her from the front. It looks a little bit more better proportion, because we generally think of hair coming down in the back. So because we don't have that, and I think perhaps they stopped the back of the head a little high. This is probably a little bit more of a default head sculpt, because usually we have hair covering it. The head on most people does come down to a bit more of a curve here at the bottom, so that's a little bit cut off, but that's probably because of the articulation, which we can see. It feels like, yes, so she'll spin at the base of the skull, the head. I can see that I can do that. But when I want to tip her forward and backwards, I can see that the whole sort of neck stalk is moving with her. So we've got a few different points of articulation there, side to side, very nice and free. That's good posing. And then front and back, we can sort of really tip her head down. She stops about there. When I try and push that back, that's not going back any further. So I can't actually really tip her head much further than that. But she does start to look a little bit distorted in terms of the, it does start to really look quite high when I tip her chin up. So I'm probably going to keep her more of a chin down, a sort of a stern eye line there. Her arms, they're going to be pretty free because they're just sort of painted here. We don't have any sculpted details to really get in the way. So I'm expecting some pretty free movements because some Jedi are not very sort of acrobatic. Asajj definitely is. So I really want to be able to get her into a really cool pose. So just testing out her elbows there. Everything is as expected there. I can, you know, really get some interesting moves there. The articulation, we can see there, the peg is in the painted section with the skin sort of coming down there in the back. Because we have this sort of bandage texture on the forearms, does a pretty good job of hiding that articulation attachment point. I've just got a few little paint flaws. This section here actually looks like little air bubbles in the paint, which is a little bit unfortunate. You can just make that out there. But of course, that's the back of the elbow. I'm not going to be seeing that much. Her hands can turn. And of course, we've also got a little bit of that articulation, a little bit stiff as they always are coming straight out of the packet. But I can see that I can kind of curl her arms in, her hands in, and backwards and forwards. And of course, side to side. This one, we've also got that same articulation, front and back. Again, a little bit tight, but there. So we can really get some points there. Now, a lot of Black Series figures, if I get the arms out of the way, have an attachment point kind of in the mid-torso. Works really well for characters that wear armor like Stormtroopers, Clone Troopers, because they have a chest plate and then an abdomen plate. So the articulation sort of connection point is hidden underneath that chest plate. Now, she doesn't have any way to sort of hide the articulation. And of course, we've got exposed skin here in the back. So there is no seam here. That is not a join, that is just paint. And again, here at the top, that is not an articulation point, that's fully solid. So I can turn her very stiffly at the top sort of the belts here. That is where she's going to turn. It's very well hidden under the belt, and it's a big sort of grip, and it's kind of clicks and has a few sort of stopping points, but I can tip her to the side, very tightly hidden. Sometimes when the articulation point's a little bit different to that sort of standardized one, sometimes we get some sort of big gaping because, you know, we have to sort of turn the figure or just the attachment point. This belt is so snug around her waist that there is nothing to really glimpse there. So when I'm turning her, I can kind of feel it putting just a little bit of pressure on these belts. Now that she's turned a little bit to the side, I can feel that they are rubbery, made out of the same sort of plastic as this section, which you can see I can bend a lot. It's not sort of that sort of really stiff, more brittle plastic. So there's a little bit of flex with those belts, which does work for turning her to the side. So I can do that. And you can see, of course, the fabric goes all the way up under the belts. This part hangs down over that. I can wiggle it a little bit. Really nicely attached skirt there going all the way up under that top belt there. So of course we do have this long piece of sort of plastic hanging down the front. Sometimes when it comes to Jedi tunics, if I push that up, I can just wiggle. If I hold her, I can see that the belt is just kind of around the top. I can just sort of wiggle it up and down on her torso there. So sometimes when we have sort of plastic hanging down over the legs, it will affect it, but this one is dead center. So of course we're going to be able to get to the legs. So again, very carefully going to lift this fabric section here. Going to really try not to sort of fluff up those edges there. So I'm expecting pretty standard articulation here. So we've got that top join, which I can show there, and I can rotate it here. The sculpting at the top is not really quite as textured here. It's a little bit flatter, but of course this is not really designed to be seen. We can see that we've actually got a dark, more of a purple fabric there for sort of her underwear section, and then we come to a flatter not really as textured. There's some sculpting lines, and here we get to the bandaged sections here running all the way down. No paint or sort of weathering or accenting going on here. It is just that kind of bandaged texture running all the way down. The knees come down in front of the sort of at the on the front, and then we can see the articulation sort of inserts there at the back of the legs. And then of course we also have it there at the ankles, where the sort of the top of the boots and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm expecting that we can get some pretty high kicks. Of course, she does have a skirt that's going to cover her legs, so she wouldn't be able to kick quite as wide as this, not unless you took scissors to that skirt and added a bunch of side splits. That skirt doesn't have a side split. I've lifted it all the way up in order to just show this. But yeah, so we're probably not going to get one-legged kicks like this, but if you want to customize the figure or perhaps alter it a little bit, we can certainly get there. The legs are going to get to about this angle, then they hit each other, but that's generally expected. And the feet, a little bit stiff, but I can go all the way to there for a good pointed toe. And I'm probably going to use her skirt up to try and sort of get her legs all kind of straight to try and get a pose, because then she's standing just a little bit to the side. I don't know if that is, she just wants a more of a wide-legged stance. That looks a little better. So I'm just going to drop her skirt down. So because she does have that skirt, that is going to limit how sort of wide-legged we can get her to stand. But I love the skirt. It's such a distinctive part of Asajj's outfit. I love seeing it in this sort of shimmery velvet type fabric here. It looks really cool. Overall, she's just a little bit wobbly, but of course, sometimes they do just come a little bit crooked out of the box, particularly around the ankles and the knees. I find that I always have to spend just a little time adjusting in the legs, especially to get them really steady. She's just a little bit wobbly. Sometimes some of the thinner characters, especially some of the female characters, are just a little bit more slender and they need a little bit more adjustment. Sometimes those heavy characters, like I recently opened up Zalbar with the sort of the big Wookiee feet and just the bulk of a Wookiee, and you just get them out and bam, they just stand straight up. They're just very sturdy. So I'm definitely going to spend a bit of time working on her posing to make sure that she's really steady. I don't want her falling off my shelf. You can see I can make her sort of rock backwards and forwards. She's not very steady on her feet at the moment, but yes, I always spend a little bit of time working on my posing and articulation before I add them to my display. So she's absolutely fantastic. Just one or two minor little paint things, just a little bit there on the chest, but it's almost lost in the reflection, and that one tiny little purple dot by her ear. But overall, absolutely fantastic. She's so cool. I can hear her voice looking at the figure. Really neat. Okay, so because she's just a little bit unsteady, I'm just going to lie her down on the desk so we can take a look at her iconic curved lightsabers. So in the micro series, she is gifted these two curved lightsabers from Count Dooku in a special ornate box, and we see her having these curved lightsabers all the way through the Clone Wars. So we can see, looking at these, that one of them has a hole and one of them has a peg, and that is because she sometimes uses them in sort of a soft S connected double-bladed lightsaber. So that's fun that we can do that with this one. We can also see that we have these two very large pegs here, which is bang smack in the center of a lightsaber, which is generally where I like to hold it in my action figures' hands. So that is going to be a little bit of a drawback, but if we put them on her belt, we're going to be able to sort of pose them like that so that we can put the hilts on them. So blank series figures have removable blades, and I have a little bit of a problem with this. I have had mixed results. Sometimes the blades come out very easily. We can put them back in and out because you can kind of see the way that they recess in there. They are made out of their own translucent plastic, and these are not. They're made in separate components, and these fit in with pegs to the hilts. But I have had on occasion, there is a particular Inquisitor figure that's still still haunts me, where the pegs were damaged. And once I took them out and I immediately regretted it. And once I connected them back into the hilt, I can't touch it. I cannot risk pulling or putting any tension on those pegs, because if they snap off, then I don't have a lightsaber to put with my characters. And generally speaking, I like to have my lightsaber users holding lit lightsabers. I love lightsabers. I like seeing them lit on display, so that's how I prefer to have it. So I'm going to give these a bit of a test, but if they're going to give me too much of a fight, I'm not going to take the blades off, because I don't want to risk breaking anything. So I'm just going to give this one a bit of a tug. It's also a little bit hard to hold with this peg being right in the middle there. So let's give this one a bit of a tug. See if this one's going to come out. Okay, so I can see that this one is the style of lightsaber attachment peg that I don't like, where we have a couple of ridges that kind of provide a little bit of an attachment sort of resistance. A little bit hard to show, but there are two little ridges which do kind of really grip inside the attachment point on the lightsabers. So while I've got this one off, I probably won't even bother with the other one. I'm just going to put this on the belt. I want to see how well it's going to attach. So I'm just going to have them pointing down, and we're just going to see, because we've got that attachment point. Wow, that's not going in at all. I'm just pressing down. Oh, okay, wow, okay, that one was a tight fit. I had to put a lot of force on that, and it finally sort of clicked in. So we can see what it would look like there. So for the other one, I'm just going to leave the lightsaber blade in, and we'll see what this one looks like if I put this one alongside. Okay, again, very stiff, but we can kind of imagine there with her hilts on the front, which looks kind of cool. The one thing that does become a little bit apparent is when you've got them resting on the body is how prominent that peg is to attach to this one. So you can kind of see that we've got that sort of extra peg there. But it is fun. She has such a unique way of carrying her lightsabers. I do kind of appreciate Hasbro for sort of including a lot of functionality with the lightsaber hilts. We can always sort of generally have some attachment point on the belts for Jedi and Darth Vader and the like. And hers is so unique that we can even do that on the front. And they are fairly sturdy. That was quite a bit of a snug fit. But I appreciate that if you do them with too small of a pegs, they can break off. And if the holes are too big, then it starts to really detract on the front of the design. So overall, that was a little bit of a push, but they do fit in there snugly, which I really like. Okay, so now I'm going to try and get her to hold one of the lightsabers in her hands, and then we'll test out. I might just try it with the one that I don't have a blade on it, because sometimes the blades can get in the way when you're trying to get it through, and I'm just not sure which end I'm going to put in her hand, because that peg is right in the middle, so I don't know. Let's have a look. Very tight, very tight. She's got a classic grip, no extended sort of trigger finger, because of course she's not going to hold a blaster. I can just get it just kind of directly under her fingers there. So she can hold it reasonably well. I was a little bit worried that peg might get in the way, but it's just underneath your fingers there. And we generally don't see the underside. Oftentimes I generally have sort of, the hand so we can sort of see it from the top edge there. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to try and put the blade back on this one now. I'm always worried about these little pegs. I don't want to... Okay, that one went back on. Okay, so there we can see. So if I was going to pose here with her lightsaber blades down, that looks really cool. Okay, I'm less mad about those pegs now. I was worried that they were really going to stop. The Inquisitors, because they wear their iconic circular hilts on their back, have two very large attachment points dead center in the middle grip. And because they hold their circular lightsabers with their hand through that center bar with the peg, it really makes it hard to get it into their hands. I really didn't like those ones. I did not like those big pegs. So I was worried that this was going to give me the same grief as those Inquisitor lightsabers. I kind of like the fact that Asajj was kind of the very first Inquisitor, sort of being the dark side Force user, working for Sidious, you know, as part of the Separatists, and she's sort of the precursor to the Inquisitor squad. This one's a little tight. I'm curious to see how well this one's going to go through, because the bottom parts of her lightsaber are very wide. She does have this kind of, it's a bit more, it's not completely oval, it's more of a flatter lightsaber design. I do like the painting on these ones. I forgot to show that a little bit better earlier. It's just this dark gray that's got a little bit of a metallic speckle to it, and then these black painted stripes there with some really good detail. But because we've got the slightly unusual curved shape and the slightly thicker end, because of course they do attach to each other, it's just making it a little bit harder to get it into her hands. I'm not sure the best way to do it for this one. I might try to get it past her thumb first. So carefully putting both lightsabers in each hand, we can see that we can get a really cool crossed lightsaber pose with this figure. I love this. She's so iconic with two lightsabers. I have a soft spot for characters with two lightsabers. I often pick two lightsabers in video games, going all the way back to Knights of the Old Republic and Jedi Academy. I loved using two lightsabers, so I love that we have a dark side user with two lightsabers. That's also a little less common as well. Most Sith carry one. It's just fun to see somebody with two red lightsabers. We generally don't see Maul using two separate ones. He's generally using double-bladed, so that's really fun. And of course, he's got those curved hilts, very fitting for being sort of the apprentice to Dooku of sorts there. Really fun. Okay, so this one's going to be absolutely just awesome for all kinds of poses, because of course she's got those free arms and two crossed lightsabers. We can do some really cool poses. Not quite as acrobatic, because we're not going to get her legs split quite apart because of the skirt, unless you sort of want to pull it up and do some poses. It's up to you. Absolutely fantastic. Because it isn't a plastic skirt, you do have the option of kind of pulling it up to do some high kicks and things like that. I know that is a consideration for some collectors. Particularly when we get plastic skirts, it does give you no options there. You have to sort of cut it off completely if you want to really get adventurous. But the soft goods, you can edit it. Perhaps you can undo the stitching in the back to really loosen up the posability there if you want to get a little bit wider than the circumference on the lower hem there. But she looks fantastic with her lightsabers. Just really, really cool. Okay, so the final little trick that I'm going to do, not really a trick, is test out how well the lightsabers, and that one actually came out a little bit easier than it was to put in. This one is, okay, so I want to connect the two lightsabers together. So we can see that we've got a peg and a peg hole, and I'm going to get them in sort of an S configuration. Oh, is a tight fit. But there we go, just under tension, and so we get the S. When we do it that way, we're going to get a peg hole on either side, because of course if I rotate it this way, that is not how her lightsabers join together. So if we have both pegs on each side, they're going to do that way. So if you want to get it into an S, it's going to look a little bit more like that. But of course, the way that she has them on her belt means that we have to have the pegs on these particular sides so that they curve in sort of the opposite sort of crescent shape rather than all facing the same way. So we can at least, for this one, sort of have her hand over that grip. Now that's going to be a lot harder to do. And personally, I generally think of Asajj as wielding her lightsabers independently, like on that side art of the box there. But we can at least see how they would look there. Very nice. Gives me that sort of iconic sort of soft S shape there. Such unique lightsabers, and I think Hasbro did a pretty good job, really. I know that I often say that I don't like these pegs, and I kind of wish they gave us different versions, because when you look at lightsaber hilts, there's not a lot of plastic to it. We could have just gotten a solid double bladed sort of S hilt separately to this, but at least we do have the options to do all of the different ways: separate, no blades, and connected with blades. All of the different options that we could possibly want for this figure. Almost makes me want to buy a couple so you can do different poses, especially when characters have such sort of different weapons. When you have different things, like I opened up the Paz Vizsla vintage collection figure, and Paz Vizsla has that huge big sort of heavy blaster, but then he also has a knife and his sort of forearm shield. So I kind of want two of them so I can do him with his iconic heavy blaster and then with his sort of fight with the Mandalorian for the Darksaber, where he's using his sort of bladed weapon and shield. So because they are the same accessories, you know, the lightsabers, but because we can have them in different modes, you could do them in different scenes with the sort of different, you know, have one of her when she's posed with just her hilts on her belt, then have her somewhere else in your display within a fight scene with, you know, one of the Jedi from the Clone Wars, you know, up against Anakin or Ahsoka or something like that. Absolutely fantastic. Just really cool. I just love the strong purple tones. I've always loved her costume. And I think Hasbro did a really good job interpreting her for the Black Series. Soft goods always works really well in the Black Series scale, where you just get a little bit more sort of scale to really work with fabric. Sometimes fabric in the small 3.75 inch scale, you know, it does give us flexibility, but fabric doesn't scale down. It's like water. When you sort of see scale models with water in some old films, you can see that the scaling of water drops, and that doesn't work with the size of the ships in the shot. But fabric scales very well for the Black Series line. It's obviously much smaller than a 12-inch figure, but the fabric still works really well. So I really like this figure. She was originally going to be a Captain box figure for me, but of course with the reissue, I felt like I could get this one out and get one with a slightly better box. She's just fantastic. So happy to finally have her out. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure, checked out all of the fantastic details of one of my favorite characters, and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I've also unboxed the Morgan Elsbeth figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.